It's not a surprise that Black Yellow Luffy won the recent championships in Milan and qualified to the World Championship. However, the surprising part is that Gianluca played some interesting tech card, Black Nami. It's important to note that they still played on OP08, and as with every new tech card that comes up, the best way to evaluate if it's worth playing is just to test it yourself. We are already in the 8.5 format and I would like to evaluate if this Black Nami makes sense to be played in the new format. And in this video we will go through my thought process, if it's worth or not, and also compare it to another free cost blocker maybe forgotten by some Black Yellow players, free cost Ivankov. So let's start by reading both cards to have an idea what are the effects of the cards for those of you who didn't know the cards yet. First, Nami, it's from the starter deck 14, it's 1000 counter, free cost, 2000 power, blocker, and on play effect if you have 6 or less cards in your hand and a character with a cost 8 or more, draw 1 card. And the closest comparison that I have from the cards available in our card pool is Moria Ivankov from starter deck 13, and again here 1000 power counter, cost 3, 4000 power, blocker, and on play you may trash 1 card from the top or bottom of your life cards, reveal up to 1 character card with a cost of 5 from your hand and add it to the top of your life cards face down. By direct comparison, in my opinion, those cards occupy the same slot in a deck that will be free cost blocker with some utility effect. From experience we know that in Black Yellow Luffy we have around 8 flex slots. However, I would avoid playing both of these cards. I think it's better for consistency to just choose one of them and play 2 copies. So either 2 copies of Ivankov or 2 copies of Nami in a deck. I saw some lists already cooking in 8.5 that try both cards, but I think it's mostly for the testing phase than the final decision of the deck build. So both of these cards, because they are free cost, are good targets for Moria, of course. We will speak about it in a moment, but I would like to speak about them before we are in our mid game, late game. Those cards have different utility. With the Nami, if you play Nami early, she's just blocker. What is important to note, 2000 power, 4000 power, they are irrelevant in current meta. Doesn't matter if we are speaking OP08 or 8.5, because red purple low is banned. It doesn't matter if your blocker has 2000 power, 4000 power, because most of the removal in the game is based on the cost, and both of the cards cost 3. So early game, if you play them down, Nami will be just a blocker because of the condition. Obviously early game we don't have the 8 cost on board, but sometimes we might be in a spot where we need to live through the turns, especially in 8.5. I would like to point it now that we are speaking strictly 8.5, so all blue, a lot of Doffy players, a lot of purple players probably as well expected in form of purple Luffy. So I would like you to think with this approach that the meta is much weaker, and we already can see from the on-play effect Nami that she is mostly targeted to the slower meta. But we will get to it in a moment. As a contrast to Nami, we have Ivankov, and Ivankov is interesting in a way. This card not only helps us to awaken if we need to by trashing 1 card from life, but we can also plant something useful in the early mid-game to stop the aggression from our opponent and also develop the blocker. So the example of such situation would be, let's say we are early in the game, but our opponent maybe swarm the board, and we are afraid that there will be too much aggression, and maybe we still need to work on our hand. Something cool that we can do with Ivankov, can play him down for freedom. Then we trash the life, show our opponent the 5 cost big brother, in this situation Monkey D. Luffy, because we want to stop the aggression. But what is really important, we put him into the life face down. So even if our opponent attacks into our life, we can still trigger the character. Then we can follow up with some baby, let's say, to play around the pudding. That is quite popular in the blue decks to fight us. And now our opponent has to make a choice in their turn. Do they want to swing into us and activate the trigger? Maybe we can shoot the Weevil this way, or Boa Hancock if we are playing against Luffy. Or do they want to pass the turn, but then they already see the Luffy on board, so they know that next turn we can just crack the Luffy and then bam, we are on 2 life and we can pop something anyway and even draw a card from the Luffy. So that's the point. Ivankov is really flexible basically in early mid game and later even in the Moria turns. So this is something that I would like bring your attention to. If we would do the same with the Nami, we would just develop the blocker and stay on 3 life, and then our opponent has the initiative to decide what they want to do. So early game, I would not rely on Nami, or against the decks that are really aggressive in the early mid game. I think for those situations I can do much cooler things with the Ivankov. But let's move on to the more late game scenarios where the Nami can shine, especially in the slower matchups like the black matchups, mirror, maybe even Luffy and purple Luffy, depending on your board state and how experienced the opponent is. So the earliest situation to have an advantage from Nami is obviously the Moria turn. However, I will probably not play it on the 8 Dawn Moria turn, but let's just present the situation for the comparison. So when we are at 8 Dawn, we are probably still not yet in the 0 life. Normally this is the turn where we want to awaken, most likely using the babies. But let's say maybe we are even at 4 life, maybe our opponent is starving us for whatever reason, and we want to go into value Moria. So in the past, the value Moria was always with some card draw and the Searcher, for example, or even with the Awakener. And normally we would play the Moria for 8 Dawn and together with the Kuzan, for example, to draw a card and have a reducer on board. If we play the blocker Nami, obviously we can bring her as well together with the Moria, and then the rest is, let's say, Searcher. Okay, but the problem is if we go for such value Moria, then we need to have already 6 cards or less in hand to have a draw from Nami, and then obviously search from Garp. So this is like the weaker value Moria turn with the Nami instead of the Kuzan. And there is hard condition to meet, because playing Black Yellow Luffy, we want to stay on the high amount of cards in hand. The only example would be the blue matchup. So in blue matchup, depending how the matchup goes, we might want to actually play Nami to regain the cards in hand. Maybe they pudding us early, but we were able to set up Nami in trash. And then we can start digging again through the deck. So this is the earliest turn that I would play value Moria with combination with Nami, but normally 8 Dawn turn, I think most often we would just awaken with our Awakeners and the babies to set up stronger Moria turn next turn, and we will speak about it just in the moment. Just for the comparison, obviously we can do the same with Ivankov. Again, we can decide if we want to use the on-play effect, then we are trashing the life and maybe set up a better awakening next turn. So depending on our strategy and the board from the opponent, I think still for the value Moria it's higher value, even though we give the card from hand to the life. we can set up it especially against aggro decks in a way that is beneficial for us, and we still have the blocker on board that needs to be removed. Obviously, situation will be much different on Tendon Turn, or if we already manipulated the life, so let's speak about it in the moment. But here, still in a meta when I might want to play Moria on curve for whatever reason instead of going into Awakening, I think Ivankov would have advantage here over Nami. But now let's speak about the late game, where we are already at Tendon in a good spots. Okay, so Tendon Turn, let's start with the turn where we use the Moria Nami combo. Most often, if you have Moria in hand, if you set up your trash, you can go into your game plan with just attaching 2 Dawn to your leader and then follow up with the Moria play. And here what is important to note, we are already at 0 life. So let's say our opponent pushed us the previous turn, we don't have anything set up. And let's say we are in a matchup where we want to stay on 1 life and start looping most optimally 9000 power leader 1 life, but we cannot do it from the 0. So we need to start somewhere. And to do that, one of the options that we have is obviously Moria Turn. So what we can do is we play the Moria for the 8 Dawn and we bring up the Nami and a baby. Okay, so then obviously depending on our hand, if our hand is already at 6 or less, we are drawing a card. We can force this kind of situation even better if we trash the card for our leader's effect before playing the Moria, because then we go -1 in hand, take the big brothers from the trash, and then as you can see we can activate the Sabo, bring the Sabo, do all the magic. But what I want to bring attention to, that in this situation we developed 2 blockers against aggressive deck. The blocker that work like Kuzan allowed us to draw a card that we waste for the leader's effect, and Sabo obviously is preventing the KO effects, not so relevant in the Doffy matchup for example, but still, leader is 7k, we have 2 blockers, 1 life ready for the next turn, maybe to play another Moria and so on. And our opponent is really tough play now, because it's not so easy in this meta to remove 2 blockers at once. Obviously they can use the Gravity Blade, so then they get rid of both of them. But on Tendon Turn it would mean that they are left with 3 Dawns open, so it means maximum 8000 power attack, and we can easily counter it with the 2k counter. So even if they remove both of our blockers, they push us, we just need 2k counter to counter the attack that maybe we just drew with Nami, and still we have Moria on board. So there is too many threats that they need to address in 1 turn to put us back to 0. And if they don't put us back to 0, then next turn we start our engine. We use the leader effect to use both transformations and then still stay on 1 life, 9000 power. We can chain Moria and so on and so on. And another example with the Nami will be the situation, for example, in Mirror or maybe in some black matchups where we want to chain Moria, but maybe we have a turn where we no longer have Moria, we didn't find it. What should we do? Then obviously we still want to loop, so we keep babies in hand, and in this particular example we can play baby Luffy, activate transformation, get the plus 2000 to our leader, so nothing crazy yet. Then we can draw from Luffy if we need to, searching for this Moria, And then what we want to do, we still want to use our leader's effect to reduce cards in hand depending on the board state, and then loop our life again into 9k. But what's important here, that if I'm already meeting the requirement for the 6 cards or less in hand, I can just play the Nami from hand. Very simple, for freedom. And you can see I still have freedom left. So Nami will draw me a card searching for another Moria for next turn. It is unfortunate, another Sabo. But then I can transform back into 9000 power leader using Sabo effect, searching still for Moria, drawing 2, trashing 2, whatever, and I still have 1 don left to assign for my attacks, maybe 10k with Moria and so on. The main idea here is that even though you didn't have Moria, you had so many chances to find another one, because you transformed Rocket Luffy, you put the Nami on board, you draw, and then you protect everything with Sabo. So in a sense, the Nami here, especially in black matchup and mirror, works as a little Sabo, because they need to respect 2 blockers. And you have more and more time to search through your deck to find another cards. Maybe you draw another Nami, maybe you still have the babies in hand, then you can adjust accordingly. So very, very powerful card when we run out of gas. This is the advantage of the Nami. If you are in the matchup where you are going card by card, you are losing your resources, and then you want to come back into the game, then you have the Nami ready. Another example, against maybe faster meta, when you play against, let's say, the Flamingo, they pudding you. But if you play it smart and you have the trash ready, the only thing that you really need is Gecko Moria or the babies, or even the Nami. The only problem is that you need the Gecko Moria on board because of this 8 cost character requirement. So that's the only bad part about Nami, that you need to live through Gecko Moria turn that is not always so easy in such fast meta. Another good thing is, again, in blue matchup that we expect the most in 8.5 is that even if they bounce Nami into hand, they are basically giving you the free draw the next turn. If they use Jozu, Bouncer Low and so on, if you have the babies in hand, next turn will be the same again, card advantage from Nami. Or if they try to push for lethal, you have one more 1000 power counter in hand. So really, really handy in the late game. If you are able to draw into your Nami, then you should be okay to regain the card advantage. On the flip side, we can do some disgusting Tendon Moria turn with Ivankov as well, but here the scenario is a little bit different. So let's say you play against a player that is trying to keep you at 2 life, because there are some strategies that they try to starve you on 2 life maybe, and then push you down with the flurry of attacks in 1 turn, or maybe threaten lethal every turn, just poking you by 5, then you counter and then they stop. A quite popular strategy still, and here the answer is what you can do that is really disgusting. If you prepare your trash in advance with proper countering prior Tendon Turn with Moria, you can awaken straight from this spot and go into 7000 power leader. So what you want to do, you need Moria and the big Luffy in hand to do that. But it's really disgusting turn, because okay, we play the Moria, and Moria brings the Ivankov, obviously, and brings the arrested baby Luffy. So this is a little bit more advanced, because you need to know what you want to do. So you bring all this stuff, Then you do the effect from Ivankov, so you trash the top life, and then you show your opponent, hey, I have the big Luffy and I put him back here. Then you activate the Luffy, pumping the leader into 7k, and all is good, because now you can use the effect from Monkey D. Luffy to draw a card and trash a card from the top. Monkey D. Luffy is now buffed, but it's quite irrelevant most of the times. But what you can do now, you are going to awaken into 2 life, because you trash the card, take your big boys, put them back into life, and in this way, 7000 power leader, 2 strong attackers on board, and the blocker. Disgusting turn, because even if they manage to remove the Ivankov and they jam you, or they do whatever they want, you are still at 7k, so it's not so easy to jam you, and even if they do, put the card that you maybe don't need that much on the top, or maybe you have some duplicates in trash, and then you say, okay, it goes to the bottom, next turn I'm looping the 9000 power leader regardless. So this is the main selling point for the Ivankov, that if your opponent thinks they are playing smart with you, they try to starve you, then boom, Moria Ivankov, 5 cost Luffy, answer this board, because the next turn I'm looping 9000 power leader. If you don't push the life, I'm staying at 2 life, or maybe I can use the effect again to trash the life, draw, and go with the loop again. So a lot of possibilities for the card advantage, but obviously it requires a little bit more setup than the Nami turn, but also Nami you cannot use for the awakening. So I would put it this way, Nami is much better after you awaken, but you might have some troubles to meet the condition or to awaken earlier versus the aggressive decks. However, once you are awakened, once you need the card advantage, Nami is amazing tech card. On the other hand, Emporio Ivankov ensures that your deck is consistent enough to perform your game plan. So you want to awaken most of the time with 7000 power leader, 1 or 2 lives, depending on the situation. Or even you might want to plant some characters in your life during the early mid-game to stop the aggression from your opponent with Rocket Luffy, or maybe some early buffing your leader into 7000 power, depending on your opponent. So this is my initial thought on those 2 cards. Now I will show you some short presentation pointing out those stuff once again for the summary, and that's it. So I made it mostly for myself, but I thought that maybe One Piece community can get some knowledge, especially that Black Yellow Luffy is a really hard deck to play and really hard deck to build, because like I said, 8 flex spots for some of you, maybe a lot, for some of you maybe not enough. But you need to really think what you expect to meet in your tournaments. If you expect slower meta, I would most likely play Nami. If I expect faster decks, then for sure Emporio Ivankov. So to sum up, side by side, both these cards have different power, but it's irrelevant for now, unless some deck like Red Purple Low that has a removal based on the power comes back, then obviously Ivankov should be stronger. Another thing is both of them are blockers, so here 1-1, and then we have the meta calls. If we are expecting the slow meta, we should pick up Nami because of the conditions for the late game. However, if we expect the fast meta, Ivankov will help us to manipulate the life a little bit easier, awaken a little bit earlier, and also provide the blocker on board to try and start looping this 9000 power 1 life leader. And finally, like I just said, in slow meta, it's quite easy to understand that Nami is amazing in late game. Doesn't matter if she comes from your Moria turn or you need to play her from hand to search for Moria. Late game, Nami is a beast. On the other hand, Ivankov is amazing in early and mid game. So again, depending what is your meta call, you might want to play one or another. Like I spoke through the video, I would avoid to play both of them in one deck. I would opt to play either 2 copies of Nami or 2 copies of Ivankov. And that's it for today. Let me know in the comments below which card do you like more in your Black Yellow Luffy deck. Is it Black Nami? Is it Yellow Ivankov? Maybe other tech card, or maybe you play both of them or none of them. Let me know, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye bye.